Great. So let me start with the background introduction. It's not moving. So it has been documented in the literature that there is a noticeable racial disparity gap. For example, the mortgage rejection rate is significantly higher among those racial minorities, with the highest denial rate of about 27% for those Black mortgage applicants. And the literature, so given the importance of access to credit for wealth accumulation and different social issues, the academic literature has been developing to a stage where we pretty much understand what is going on given all of the data availability. So for example, we know that people from different racial backgrounds tend to have different income and credit profile, and also we know the existence of statistical discrimination and also behavioral biases in the loan origination process. And we also know that minority borrowers tend to have more exposure to lenders with strict underwriting standards, and also they tend to live in neighborhoods with less standardized housing stocks that makes them really hard to lend against. All right, so today we have 3 papers, and all 3 papers try to contribute to this literature, but understand what we can do to help close this racial gap and how to help minorities gain credit access. And the common theme of all 3 papers is that they all try to understand this question by asking what we can do from the supply side of credit, which is bank. Okay, so the first 2 papers, or the implied solution from the first 2 papers, is that if we can increase minority representation from the supply side, we can achieve a better outcome. In other words, minorities can help minorities. And the last paper, we switched the order, and so the last paper focuses on market forces, and it finds that if we can have a better if we can have more bank competition, we can discipline lending, and also we can close racial gap. So my big picture thoughts are, all 3 papers are extremely insightful. They bring really rich data and provide very compelling empirical evidence. And it's actually very great to have all 3 papers that fit into this one session. So the first paper focuses on the role of loan officers. The second paper focuses on the role of organizations. And the last paper focuses on the role of the market. So my question is, what's the most efficient and effective way to improve minorities' credit access? All right, so with this question in mind, let's have a closer look at all 3 papers. So first, I'm going to focus on the first 2 papers. Both papers provide empirical support for increasing minority representation on the supply side as a potential remedy. Okay, so the first paper studies the role of minority loan officers in the provision of mortgage credit, and it combined 3 data sets. One is the expanded confidential HMDA data, second is MLO registration data, and the third one is FHA loan performance data. So the first key finding is that minority loan officers are underrepresented compared to the US population, and they find that minority applicants have much better outcome if they can work with a minority loan officer. And then the second paper studies the role of minority-owned banks on economic resilience of minority communities, and they find that minority-owned banks improve the economic resilience of minority communities. So my general reaction is that overall, I'm fairly convinced by the findings of each paper. Like Jordan said, all results are very consistent with his prior. And now, given the effects of loan officers and bank owners, what's their relative importance for helping minorities gain credit access? Right, so I think the answer of this question rely on which organizational structure is closer to the current banking industry. Is it more centralized or is it more decentralized? So when I'm talking about this, I focus on within a bank, whether CEO or bank owners can really deliver their message to the application to the branch office, or actually branch managers can have full say in terms of all the loan application results. In other words, if the organizational structure is centralized, do loan officers have enough discretion to make a difference? If we believe the organization is more decentralized, do owners have enough control to influence loan applications? So in short, my answer is, I believe both parties have both parties can influence the outcome of minority communities. So while minority loan officers do not set credit standards, they can still decide whether you want to initiate a conversation with the branch manager to get some benefit for minority applicants. While bank owners do not really make decisions at individual loan basis, or they do not interact with borrowers directly, they can set aggregate lending volume limit in each community, and they can also improve minority representations at their institutions. And therefore, with the belief that both parties can play a role, which one plays more important role in helping minorities? And so I think there may be a way to decompose the relative contribution. For example, we can look at whether bank county year fixed effects actually contribute to a large variation in minority credit approval. And if that's the case, it seems to suggest that decision-making is mostly at organization level. And I believe that's a conversation that our academic scholars can have with the actual bankers and also regulators to really think deeply about which role is more important in solving this problem. And then my second comment is, when we combine all race together and call them minority, what are we doing? And what are we missing? All right, so here on the slide, I'm plot the regional distribution of minority loans. So I combined all minority race into one category called minority loan officers and plot the regional distribution on the left. And then I can also plot this I can also show the regional distribution of black loan officers on the right. And then I can do the same thing for Hispanic, do the same thing for Asian. All right, so you can see that when we look at cross-sectional distribution of different type of racial minorities, they actually have very different regional distribution. Similarly, in the second paper we saw today, when we look at the revolution, the time series revolution of different type of minority-owned banks, we see a sharp divergence over time. So I understand there are statistical reasons to group all minority groups together, otherwise we wouldn't call them minorities. But when we do that, we threw away a lot of information. And in fact, there are large disparities across minorities. And so I wonder, are there any theoretical rationale behind grouping minorities together, right? So for example, do black loan officers also help Asian borrowers access credit? And do Hispanic-owned banks also improve black communities' resilience? All right, so in fact, in my working paper, we find actually same race seem to be what matters. And then the big picture comment is, since each racial minority group has its own challenges, when we group them together, we miss all of those nuances. Okay, so that's my comment to the first two papers. And the third paper focuses on market forces. All right, so the paper studies whether free financial market reduces discrimination in the lending market, and therefore it can help narrow entrepreneurial gaps. So the key finding in this paper is, indeed, increased competition reduces discrimination and narrows entrepreneurial gaps. Okay, so very important question, and my first reaction was that the overall time series trend seems to support the empirical analysis in this paper. So for all of us, I believe I don't need to convince you what's going on in this industry, right? The banking industry has been consolidating in the past decade or so, and the overall number of banks has been declining. And also, no new bank charters for several years after the Great Financial Recession, and also we saw many branch closures and merger and acquisitions. However, what we find, or both in terms of academic research and also policy reports, is banking industry seems to become more competitive because of the competition from shadow banks and also from fintech companies. And also, we know that digital disruption allows banks to compete more nationally. The scope of competition has been increased from local to national because of digital disruption. And as a result, it's true that the banking industry has been developing to a more competitive landscape. And so in that sense, the overall time series trend supports the empirical analysis. However, I wonder, is this really driven by a competitive market? Is it driven by competition or regulation? We know that there has been significant progress in fair lending, right? So thanks to all of our regulators and policymakers, activity in this space, there has been significant progress in fair lending for consumer credit over the last 30 years. All right, so using long time series indeed provides very nice variation for statistical analysis, but the industry has been through so many structural changes since 1990s, right? So my recommendation would be, it would be really nice to divide analysis into multiple episodes so that we can really understand what is going on in the space. For example, we can look at 1990s and then early 2000s, which was the housing boom, and also there was a rise of private label mortgage securitization, and also we can look at financial crisis, and especially post the crisis, right? We had a very strict, we had very different and a stricter regulatory regime. Okay, so to sum up, I think all three papers are very insightful, and it brings very rich empirical analysis and evidence to bear on a very important topic. All right, so I think we have pieces of evidence on different supply side elements that help improve minorities' credit access. And I have three remaining questions, and I guess we will open the floor to the audience, and so I will use a three question as a start. I think, which tool is most efficient? When and where we need a regulatory intervention? We cannot, if we can just trust the free market, then why do we still need all of those regulations? I think there must be some room for regulation, and when and where we need those regulations. And fundamental challenges faced by different minority racial groups are definitely something that we need to better understand. We cannot just group everyone into one group called minorities. By doing that, we are discriminating against a different type of groups, right? And so then lastly, is more credit necessarily good, right? We know that more leverage means more risk, and when it comes to a crisis, whether that's really beneficial. All right, so with that, thank you very much for your attention, and let's open the floor to the audience.